From the earliest stages of her life, Sabrina Pasterski demonstrated a kind of intellectual intensity that is rare even among gifted children. Her extraordinary talent did not emerge suddenly as a single dramatic moment, but unfolded gradually through patterns of curiosity, focus, and an unusual relationship with complexity. What distinguished her was not merely that she learned quickly, but that she was drawn naturally toward understanding how things worked at their deepest level. While many young students absorb information to satisfy teachers or pass exams, Pasterski appeared motivated by something far more internal, a persistent need to make sense of the physical world on her own terms. As a child, she showed a fascination with motion, machines, and structure. These interests were not superficial or fleeting. They reflected an early intuition for physical principles, long before she had the formal language of mathematics or physics to describe them. She did not treat science as a collection of facts to be memorized, but as a living system of relationships that could be explored, tested, and questioned. This mindset is often associated with great theoretical thinkers, and in her case, it appeared long before any institutional training shaped her approach. What is especially striking about Pasterski's early development is how self-directed it was. Rather than relying heavily on structured instruction, she often pursued understanding independently. She read advanced material well beyond typical grade levels, not because she was pushed, but because she was genuinely interested. This kind of learning requires patience and discipline, qualities that are difficult for most children to sustain. Yet she displayed an unusual ability to concentrate deeply for long periods, immersing herself in problems that would frustrate even many adults. Her relationship with mathematics provides a powerful example. Mathematics can be intimidating, abstract, and unforgiving, especially at advanced levels. For Pasterski, however, it became a natural language rather than an obstacle. She approached mathematical concepts as tools for expressing physical ideas, not as ends in themselves. This perspective allowed her to move fluidly between intuition and formal reasoning, a balance that is essential for original scientific thinking. Even at a young age, she was not content to accept formulas without understanding where they came from and why they worked. Another defining aspect of her early talent was her comfort with difficulty. Many students, even gifted ones, prefer problems they can solve quickly to maintain a sense of success. Pasterski showed the opposite tendency. She gravitated toward problems that resisted easy answers. When confronted with confusion or uncertainty, she did not interpret it as failure, but as a signal that something interesting was happening. This attitude toward confusion is a hallmark of scientific maturity and is rarely seen so early in life. Her technical curiosity extended beyond theory into the physical world. She did not see a sharp divide between thinking and doing. Building, testing, and experimenting were as natural to her as reading and calculating. This integration of mind and hands allowed her to develop an intuitive understanding of physical laws. Concepts like force, balance, momentum, and stability were not just abstract ideas, but lived experiences. This practical engagement reinforced her theoretical insights, creating a feedback loop between thought and reality. The environment around her also played a subtle but important role. While not driven by external pressure or competition, she benefited from having the freedom to explore her interests without being constrained by rigid expectations. This freedom allowed her curiosity to grow organically rather than being shaped solely by academic benchmarks. Instead of racing toward achievements for recognition, she followed questions wherever they led, even when there was no clear reward. As she moved into her teenage years, her talent became more visible, but it retained the same underlying character. She did not suddenly transform into a different kind of thinker. Rather, the depth that had always been present simply became more apparent. Her projects grew more ambitious, her questions more fundamental, and her ability to connect ideas more refined. Yet the core motivation remained unchanged. She was still driven by wonder rather than ambition. Observers often note that extraordinary talent at a young age can sometimes lead to burnout or rigidity later in life. In Pasterski's case, the opposite seemed to occur. Her early brilliance did not trap her in a narrow identity as a prodigy. Instead, it laid a flexible foundation that allowed her thinking to evolve. Because her learning was rooted in understanding rather than performance, she remained open to revising her ideas and questioning herself. This intellectual humility is critical for long-term creativity in science. What makes her early talent particularly significant is how closely it aligns with the qualities required for breakthroughs in fundamental physics. Fields like spacetime, gravity, and quantum theory demand not just intelligence, but patience, independence, and a willingness to live with unresolved questions. Pasterski's early habits prepared her naturally for this kind of work. She was comfortable spending long periods thinking without immediate answers, trusting that clarity would eventually emerge. Her story also challenges common assumptions about genius. It suggests that extraordinary talent is not simply about being faster or better at standard tasks, but about having a different relationship with knowledge itself. Pasterski did not treat learning as accumulation. She treated it as exploration. This distinction explains why her abilities appeared so early and developed so steadily. She was not racing ahead, she was digging deeper. By the time she reached formal academic environments, her early development had already shaped her identity as a thinker. She entered these institutions not as someone waiting to be defined by them, but as someone bringing a fully formed curiosity and method of inquiry. This is rare and powerful. It means that her later achievements were not departures from her early talent, but natural continuations of it. The recognition she received for her early abilities was often framed in dramatic terms, but the reality was quieter and more profound. Her talent did not announce itself through spectacle. It revealed itself through consistency, depth, and an unwavering commitment to understanding the universe at its most basic level. This quiet intensity is what makes her early development so compelling and so relevant to discussions about the nature of genius. In many ways, Sabrina Pasterski's extraordinary talent at a young age was less about being exceptional and more about being authentic. She followed her curiosity honestly, without distortion from external expectations. This authenticity allowed her abilities to grow naturally and sustainably. It is a reminder that the seeds of great scientific insight are often planted early, not through pressure or acceleration, but through freedom, curiosity, and a deep respect for the unknown. This early chapter of her life sets the tone for everything that follows. It explains why later accomplishments feel less like surprises and more like inevitable expressions of a mind that was always tuned toward fundamental truth. Her story invites us to rethink how we identify and nurture talent, emphasizing depth over speed and understanding over recognition. In doing so, it offers a powerful example of how extraordinary minds are shaped long before the world learns their names. The moment when Sabrina Pasterski built and flew her own aircraft as a teenager is often repeated as a headline, but reducing it to a single astonishing fact misses its deeper meaning. This event was not an isolated act of brilliance or a dramatic attempt to gain attention. Instead, it was the natural expression of a way of thinking that had already been forming for years. The airplane was not simply a machine she assembled. It was a physical manifestation of her understanding, curiosity, and confidence in applying abstract ideas to the real world. To understand why this achievement matters, it is important to consider what it actually involves. Building an aircraft from scratch requires far more than mechanical skill. It demands an understanding of aerodynamics, structural integrity, materials science, propulsion, balance, and safety. Each component must work in harmony with the others. A minor miscalculation can lead to catastrophic failure. For an adult engineer, this task is complex. For a teenager, it borders on unimaginable. Yet Pasterski approached it not as an impossible challenge, but as a problem that could be understood step by step. Her decision to build a plane was driven by curiosity rather than ambition. She wanted to understand flight not just in theory, but in practice. Books and equations could explain lift, drag, thrust, and gravity, but they could not fully capture what happens when air flows over a wing or how a structure responds to stress during motion. By committing to building an aircraft, she placed herself inside the problem. She was no longer studying flight from a distance. She was engaging with it directly. The process itself was an education unlike any classroom experience. Every design choice required careful reasoning. The shape of the wings, the placement of the engine, the distribution of weight, and the selection of materials all involved trade-offs. Improving one aspect often introduced challenges in another. This forced her to think holistically, to see the aircraft as an interconnected system rather than a collection of separate parts. This systems-level thinking is essential in physics, where changing one variable often affects many others in subtle ways. Equally important was the discipline required to carry the project through to completion. Building an aircraft is slow, demanding work. It involves long periods of measuring, adjusting, and testing, often with little visible progress. For many young people, enthusiasm fades when results are not immediate. Pasterski demonstrated the opposite tendency. She remained focused and patient, willing to invest time and effort without external validation. This patience reflects a deeper intellectual maturity, an ability to value the process of understanding over quick success. When the aircraft was finally completed, the act of flying it carried profound symbolic weight. Flying a plane you have built yourself is an act of trust in your own reasoning. It means believing that your understanding of physical laws is accurate enough to keep you safe in the air. This confidence was not reckless. It was grounded in careful preparation and deep respect for the physics involved. She did not challenge gravity out of defiance, but out of understanding. The flight demonstrated something that cannot be easily measured by exams or grades: the ability to translate theory into reality. Many students excel at solving problems on paper but struggle when faced with real-world complexity. Pasterski showed an early ability to move fluidly between abstract principles and concrete outcomes. This ability is rare and incredibly valuable, especially in fields that bridge theory and experiment. The public reaction to this achievement often focused on how unusual it was for someone so young. Media outlets framed it as a story of genius or prodigy. While not inaccurate, this framing risks obscuring what truly matters. The plane was not impressive because of her age alone. It was impressive because it revealed a mindset that treats knowledge as something active rather than passive. She did not wait for permission to apply what she knew. She acted on it responsibly and creatively. This episode also reveals her comfort with risk, but not in the reckless sense. Building and flying a plane involves real danger, yet she approached that danger with respect and preparation. This mirrors the intellectual risks she later took in theoretical physics. She was willing to engage with difficult, uncertain problems, fully aware that there were no guarantees of success. Just as she trusted physical laws to hold her plane in the air, she trusted logical consistency and mathematical structure to guide her thinking in abstract domains. Another important aspect of this achievement is how it shaped her relationship with authority and convention. She did not rely solely on institutional frameworks or established pathways to explore her interests. Instead of waiting until university or graduate school to engage deeply with physics and engineering, she took initiative on her own. This independence would later become a defining feature of her academic life, as she questioned prevailing assumptions and resisted pressure to conform to popular research trends. The aircraft project also highlights her integration of creativity and precision. Designing a plane requires imagination, the ability to envision forms and solutions that do not yet exist. At the same time, it demands exactness. Measurements must be accurate, calculations correct, and tolerances respected. Pasterski balanced these demands naturally. She did not see creativity and rigor as opposites, but as partners. This balance is central to groundbreaking scientific work, where new ideas must ultimately withstand strict logical and empirical scrutiny. In a broader sense, the plane represents a bridge between classical and modern physics. Flight is governed by well-established principles, yet mastering them deeply prepares the mind for more abstract challenges. By engaging so directly with classical mechanics and aerodynamics, she developed an intuitive feel for physical law. This intuition later supported her exploration of far more abstract concepts, such as spacetime and quantum gravity, where intuition is harder to build but even more valuable. The attention she received after this accomplishment opened doors, but it did not change her direction. She did not become distracted by praise or redefine her goals to match public expectations. Instead, she continued to pursue understanding with the same quiet intensity that had driven her before. The aircraft did not mark a turning point toward fame. It was simply one step along a path already defined by curiosity. This episode also serves as a powerful counter-example to narrow definitions of academic excellence. Traditional metrics often fail to capture qualities like independence, resilience, and the ability to synthesize knowledge across domains. Pasterski's aircraft demonstrated all of these qualities in a way that no test score could. It showed that true understanding reveals itself through action as much as through analysis. For young students and aspiring scientists, her story carries an important lesson. Mastery does not come only from consuming information, but from engaging with it actively and fearlessly. By building something real, she confronted the limits of her understanding and expanded them. Each challenge she encountered forced her to refine her thinking, making her knowledge more robust and flexible. In retrospect, it is clear that this achievement was not an anomaly, but a preview. The same qualities that allowed her to build and fly an aircraft would later define her work in theoretical physics: independence of thought, respect for fundamental principles, patience with complexity, and the courage to trust her own reasoning. The airplane was not just a machine. It was an early expression of a mind learning how to navigate both the physical world and the deeper structures that govern it. This act continues to resonate because it captures something essential about scientific creativity. It shows how understanding becomes most powerful when it moves beyond abstraction and enters experience. In lifting off the ground in an aircraft she built herself, Pasterski demonstrated not only technical skill, but a profound alignment between thought and reality. That alignment, more than the spectacle of flight, is what makes this moment so significant in understanding who she is and how she thinks. Sabrina Pasterski's journey into institutions like the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and Harvard University is often described as a natural progression for someone of her ability, yet this description hides the deeper significance of what those years represent. These environments did not create her way of thinking, but they revealed it more clearly by placing her among some of the strongest scientific minds in the world. Her presence in such settings highlighted a contrast between conventional academic pathways and a more independent, internally driven approach to learning and discovery. When she entered MIT, she stepped into a culture defined by intensity, competition, and an extraordinary concentration of talent. For many students, this environment is overwhelming. It encourages constant comparison, achievement metrics, and a fast-paced race toward measurable success. Pasterski navigated this atmosphere in a distinctly different way. She was not motivated by outperforming peers or accumulating honors. Instead, she treated MIT as a resource, a place where tools, ideas, and conversations could support deeper understanding rather than define her worth. Her engagement with coursework reflected this attitude. She was less interested in solving problems quickly and more focused on understanding why solutions worked. This often meant spending long hours thinking about a single concept while others moved on. In a system that rewards speed and productivity, this approach can appear inefficient. Yet it allowed her to build a more coherent and integrated understanding of physics, one that would later support original thinking rather than incremental progress. MIT also exposed her to the limits of structured education. While the institute offers exceptional training, it necessarily follows curricula designed for large groups. Pasterski recognized early on that true understanding often emerges in the spaces between formal instruction. She supplemented lectures and problem sets with independent reading, deep reflection, and personal exploration of ideas that were not required or immediately useful for exams. This habit reinforced her intellectual autonomy, ensuring that her curiosity remained self-directed rather than externally shaped. Her transition to Harvard marked another significant phase. Harvard's theoretical physics community is deeply engaged with foundational questions about spacetime, gravity, and quantum theory. These are not areas where progress comes easily or quickly. They demand long periods of conceptual struggle and a tolerance for ambiguity. Pasterski found this environment more aligned with her natural inclinations. Rather than being discouraged by unanswered questions, she was energized by them. At Harvard, she worked on problems connected to the nature of spacetime and information, particularly in contexts related to black holes and gravity. These topics sit at the frontier of modern physics, where established theories collide and fail to fully explain observed or predicted phenomena. Engaging with such problems requires not only technical skill, but the courage to question deeply rooted assumptions. Pasterski demonstrated a willingness to do exactly that, even when it meant standing apart from mainstream approaches. One of the most notable aspects of her time at Harvard was her relationship with mentorship and authority. While she respected the expertise of senior physicists, she did not treat their views as final. She listened carefully, absorbed insights, and then tested ideas against her own reasoning. This balance between openness and independence is difficult to achieve, especially for young researchers surrounded by highly accomplished figures. Yet it allowed her to maintain intellectual integrity while benefiting from collaboration and dialogue. Her academic choices during this period further illustrate her unconventional priorities. She showed little interest in traditional markers of success, such as prestigious fellowships, awards, or rapid publication. In some cases, she declined opportunities that would have elevated her profile, choosing instead to preserve freedom of thought. This decision puzzled many observers, but it reflects a deep understanding of how creativity functions. She recognized that external pressures, even positive ones, can subtly shape research directions and constrain originality. The culture of elite institutions often encourages specialization, pushing students to define themselves narrowly to maximize productivity. Pasterski resisted this tendency. She maintained a broad perspective, connecting ideas across subfields and refusing to reduce complex questions to manageable fragments simply for the sake of progress. This holistic approach is particularly important in theoretical physics, where breakthroughs often come from seeing connections that others overlook. Her time at these institutions also revealed the tension between institutional structure and individual creativity. Universities provide resources, collaboration, and legitimacy, but they also impose expectations and timelines. Pasterski navigated this tension carefully. She took what she needed from the system while protecting the inner space required for deep thinking. This delicate balance is rare and requires a strong sense of purpose, especially in environments that subtly reward conformity. Another significant element of her academic journey was solitude. Despite being surrounded by brilliant minds, she often chose to work alone for extended periods. This was not a rejection of community, but an acknowledgement of how she thought best. Fundamental physics often demands uninterrupted contemplation, time to wrestle with ideas that resist clarity. Pasterski valued this solitude and defended it, even when it conflicted with norms of constant collaboration and communication. Her presence at MIT and Harvard also had symbolic importance. It challenged assumptions about how excellence should look. She did not follow the most visible or celebrated paths, yet her depth of understanding earned the respect of leading physicists. This demonstrated that there is more than one way to succeed at the highest levels of science, and that originality often flourishes at the margins of established systems rather than at their center. As her reputation grew, comparisons to figures like Einstein began to emerge, particularly in relation to her independence and focus on fundamentals. While such comparisons can be exaggerated, they capture a real similarity in approach. Like Einstein, Pasterski showed a preference for thinking deeply about basic principles rather than building a career through incremental advances. Her time at elite institutions did not dilute this preference. It sharpened it by providing contrast. In retrospect, her years at MIT and Harvard can be seen as a testing ground. They tested not just her intellectual ability, which was already evident, but her commitment to a particular way of doing science. Faced with opportunities for recognition and advancement, she consistently chose understanding over status. This choice shaped her identity as a physicist more profoundly than any single research result. These institutions gave her access to the frontier of modern physics, but they did not define her trajectory. Instead, they served as environments in which her existing values were clarified and strengthened. She emerged not as a product of elite education, but as an example of how true originality can coexist with, yet remain distinct from, even the most prestigious academic systems. This phase of her life illustrates that elite institutions are not ends in themselves. For Pasterski, they were tools, places to sharpen ideas and encounter challenging perspectives. What mattered most was not the name of the institution, but the depth of engagement it allowed. Her experience offers a powerful reminder that intellectual freedom and integrity are as important as access and opportunity, especially in fields that seek to understand the deepest structure of reality. Sabrina Pasterski's scientific work is centered on questions that sit at the very foundation of modern physics, questions so deep that they resist easy explanation and often lack clear experimental guidance. Rather than focusing on applications or incremental improvements, her attention is drawn to the underlying structure of reality itself. She is interested in how spacetime is organized, how gravity truly works at its most fundamental level, and how information is woven into the fabric of the universe. These are not fashionable or convenient topics. They are among the hardest problems physics has ever faced, and progress in them is slow, uncertain, and often lonely. At the heart of her work lies a concern with spacetime, not merely as a passive stage on which events occur, but as a dynamic entity that may store, transmit, and transform information. Since Einstein's theory of general relativity, spacetime has been understood as something that can bend, stretch, and respond to mass and energy. Yet this picture becomes deeply problematic when combined with quantum mechanics, the theory that governs the smallest scales of nature. Pasterski's research operates precisely in this uneasy overlap, where the smooth geometry of relativity collides with the probabilistic, discrete nature of quantum theory. One of the central puzzles she engages with is the nature of gravity in a quantum universe. Gravity is the weakest of the fundamental forces, yet it governs the large-scale structure of the cosmos. Unlike electromagnetism or nuclear forces, gravity has resisted a complete quantum description. Many physicists have attempted to quantize gravity using established frameworks, but these efforts have produced incomplete or contradictory results. Pasterski approaches this problem by questioning assumptions that are often taken for granted, asking whether our basic understanding of spacetime itself needs revision. A recurring theme in her work is the role of information. In modern physics, information is no longer seen as an abstract bookkeeping tool. It has physical meaning. Concepts such as entropy, quantum entanglement, and information conservation have become central to understanding black holes and the evolution of the universe. Pasterski has explored how information may be encoded at the boundaries of spacetime, particularly in gravitational systems. This line of inquiry connects to profound questions about whether information is ever truly lost, even in extreme environments like black holes. Black holes serve as a key testing ground for these ideas. They represent points where gravity becomes so intense that classical descriptions break down. For decades, physicists have debated what happens to information that falls into a black hole. Does it disappear forever, violating fundamental principles of quantum mechanics, or is it somehow preserved? Pasterski's work engages with this problem by examining symmetries and conservation laws that may operate at the edges of spacetime, suggesting that information could be stored in subtle, previously overlooked ways. Her approach is notable for its emphasis on symmetry. In physics, symmetries are powerful tools that reveal hidden structure and constrain what is possible. Pasterski has studied symmetries associated with spacetime itself, particularly those that appear at infinity or at boundaries rather than in local regions. These symmetries may play a crucial role in understanding how physical laws remain consistent across extreme conditions. By focusing on these deep structural features, she aims to uncover principles that are more fundamental than specific models or equations. Another important aspect of her work is its conceptual clarity. She is known for stripping problems down to their essentials, removing unnecessary mathematical complexity to reveal the core physical ideas. This does not mean her work is simplistic. On the contrary, it is often highly abstract, but the abstraction serves a purpose. It allows her to see connections between seemingly unrelated phenomena and to frame problems in ways that make their underlying structure more visible. Her research style reflects a strong preference for understanding over productivity. In an academic culture that often rewards frequent publication, Pasterski has been willing to work slowly, refining ideas over long periods. This patience is particularly important in fundamental physics, where premature conclusions can mislead entire fields. By resisting pressure to produce rapid results, she preserves the freedom to explore unconventional ideas and follow them wherever they lead. The questions she pursues also challenge the boundaries between established disciplines. Her work sits at the intersection of general relativity, quantum field theory, and information theory. Navigating this terrain requires fluency in multiple mathematical languages and a willingness to move beyond traditional categories. Pasterski does not treat these boundaries as fixed. Instead, she sees them as artifacts of human organization rather than reflections of nature itself. What makes her focus especially compelling is that it addresses not only how the universe behaves, but what it fundamentally is. When she studies spacetime, she is not merely interested in its geometry, but in its meaning. Is spacetime a fundamental entity, or does it emerge from deeper, more primitive ingredients? Is gravity a force, or a manifestation of information dynamics? These questions push physics toward philosophical territory, yet Pasterski approaches them with rigorous discipline rather than speculation. Her work also reflects a deep respect for consistency. Fundamental physics demands that theories agree with both established results and basic logical principles. Pasterski is attentive to these constraints, carefully examining whether new ideas truly fit within the broader framework of physical law. This careful reasoning distinguishes her work from more speculative approaches that prioritize novelty over coherence. Another defining feature of her research is its independence from experimental timelines. Much of modern physics is driven by data from large experiments and observatories. While this data is invaluable, it can also shape research agendas in narrow ways. Pasterski's work operates largely at a theoretical level, guided by internal consistency and conceptual necessity rather than immediate experimental confirmation. This places her in a tradition of thinkers who believe that theoretical clarity must sometimes precede empirical testing. Her focus on fundamental physics also reflects a long-term perspective. She is not aiming for quick solutions or technological spin-offs. Instead, she is contributing to a slow, collective effort to understand the deepest laws of nature. This effort may take decades to bear fruit, and its impact may only be recognized in hindsight. Pasterski appears comfortable with this uncertainty, valuing the pursuit of truth over immediate recognition. In engaging with these profound questions, she also confronts the limits of human understanding. Fundamental physics often reveals not just answers, but deeper mysteries. Pasterski's work does not shy away from these mysteries. Instead, it treats them as invitations to rethink assumptions and develop new conceptual tools. This openness to the unknown is essential in a field where progress often comes from admitting how little we truly understand. Her research trajectory suggests a commitment to exploring the roots of physical law rather than its branches. By focusing on spacetime, gravity, and quantum foundations, she is working in areas that have the potential to reshape physics at its core. Even incremental insights in these domains can have far-reaching consequences, influencing how we understand everything from particle interactions to the evolution of the cosmos. Ultimately, Sabrina Pasterski's focus on fundamental physics reflects a particular vision of science. It is a vision in which understanding matters more than application, depth more than speed, and coherence more than popularity. Her work embodies a belief that the universe is intelligible, but only if we are willing to question deeply, think patiently, and accept uncertainty as part of the journey. In this sense, her research is not just about solving equations or developing models. It is about engaging with reality at its most profound level, seeking patterns and principles that lie beneath the surface of the observable world. The recognition Sabrina Pasterski has received from leading scientists is not the kind that usually follows a carefully managed academic career. It did not emerge from a long list of awards, frequent media appearances, or a steady stream of high-profile publications. Instead, it grew quietly through conversations, letters, and assessments from physicists who themselves are deeply respected for their contributions to fundamental science. This form of recognition is subtle but powerful, because it comes from people who understand how rare true originality is and how difficult it is to sustain in modern academic environments. When senior physicists speak about Pasterski, they often emphasize not her technical skill alone, but the quality of her thinking. Many young researchers are highly competent, capable of mastering complex mathematics and applying established methods. What distinguishes Pasterski, in their view, is her tendency to approach problems from unexpected angles. Rather than extending existing frameworks in predictable ways, she asks whether the frameworks themselves are adequate. This willingness to question the foundations of a problem is what many experienced scientists recognize as the source of genuine breakthroughs. Such praise carries particular weight because it comes from individuals who have seen generations of talented students pass through elite institutions. These scientists are not easily impressed. They understand the difference between brilliance that performs well within a system and brilliance that challenges the system itself. In Pasterski, they see the latter. Her originality does not lie in producing clever variations on known ideas, but in identifying assumptions that others overlook and probing their consequences with patience and rigor. One reason her work resonates with senior physicists is that it reflects a deep respect for the history of physics. She does not treat past theories as outdated obstacles to be replaced, nor does she accept them uncritically. Instead, she engages with them as living structures, understanding why they succeeded, where they fail, and how their core insights might be preserved in more complete frameworks. This balanced attitude is rare in an era that often swings between reverence for tradition and a desire for radical novelty. Physicists who have interacted with her frequently note her ability to listen carefully before responding. In discussions, she does not rush to assert her views or dominate conversation. She absorbs perspectives, asks clarifying questions, and then offers insights that often reframe the entire discussion. This quality makes her presence intellectually valuable, even in rooms filled with accomplished researchers. Her contributions tend to elevate the level of discourse rather than simply add to it. Another aspect that draws admiration is her resistance to academic conformity. Modern research culture often encourages alignment with popular topics, funding priorities, and collaborative networks. While this can accelerate progress in certain areas, it can also discourage deep, independent thinking. Pasterski's choices signal a refusal to let external incentives dictate her intellectual direction. Senior scientists, many of whom entered physics in a different era, recognize this stance as increasingly rare and deeply important. The comparisons to Einstein that occasionally appear in discussions about her work are not made lightly by those who know the history of science. These comparisons are not claims about equivalent achievement, but about similarity in approach. Like Einstein, Pasterski is seen as someone who values conceptual clarity over formal complexity, who is willing to think alone, and who prioritizes understanding fundamental principles over immediate validation. Physicists who make these comparisons do so cautiously, aware of how easily such language can be misused, yet they persist because the resemblance feels genuine. Praise from leading scientists also reflects confidence in her long-term potential rather than immediate output. In a system that often measures success through short-term productivity, this kind of confidence is unusual. It suggests that those who know her work believe it is laying groundwork for insights that may take years or even decades to fully mature. Such patience is itself a mark of respect, acknowledging that the most important contributions to physics often cannot be rushed. What further distinguishes this recognition is that it does not seem to alter her behavior. Despite being aware of the respect she commands, Pasterski does not adjust her work to meet expectations or capitalize on reputation. She continues to pursue questions quietly, without attempting to fulfill the narratives others might construct around her. This consistency reinforces the credibility of the praise she receives. It suggests that her originality is not performative, but intrinsic. Senior physicists also appreciate her intellectual honesty. She does not present speculative ideas as established results, nor does she exaggerate the significance of partial insights. In discussions of unresolved problems, she is open about uncertainty and ambiguity. This honesty fosters trust, making others more willing to engage seriously with her ideas. In a field where overstated claims can quickly erode credibility, this restraint is deeply valued. The respect she earns also stems from her ability to connect ideas across different areas of physics. Leading scientists often specialize deeply, and they recognize how difficult it is to maintain coherence across multiple domains. Pasterski's work suggests a capacity to see unifying structures that transcend specific subfields. This integrative vision is essential for progress in fundamental physics, where the boundaries between disciplines often reflect human organization rather than natural divisions. It is also important to note that much of the praise she receives occurs outside public view. Letters of recommendation, private conversations, and informal assessments carry significant influence in academic life, yet they rarely become part of public narratives. In these contexts, physicists speak more freely and more precisely. The consistently high regard expressed in such settings speaks to a genuine belief in her intellectual depth and originality. Her reception among leading scientists also reflects a shared concern about the future of physics. Many senior figures worry that increasing specialization, administrative pressure, and competition for funding are narrowing the space for foundational thinking. In Pasterski, they see a counter-example, someone who embodies an older ideal of the physicist as a thinker deeply engaged with the nature of reality itself. Their praise is not only personal, but symbolic, expressing hope that this mode of inquiry can still survive. This recognition does not place her above criticism or exempt her from scrutiny. On the contrary, respected physicists engage seriously with her ideas, challenging them and testing their limits. This engagement itself is a form of respect. It indicates that her work is seen as worth the effort of careful analysis rather than casual dismissal. In fundamental science, being taken seriously is often more meaningful than being praised. The way leading scientists speak about Pasterski also reveals something about how they define success. Their admiration is directed not at visible achievements, but at intellectual character. They value her independence, patience, and commitment to understanding. This suggests a broader lesson about what excellence in science truly means, one that contrasts sharply with more superficial measures of accomplishment. Over time, this quiet recognition may prove more influential than any single publication or award. It creates a network of trust and respect that supports long-term inquiry. It allows ideas to circulate, be refined, and find receptive audiences when they are ready. For Pasterski, this form of recognition aligns naturally with her priorities, offering validation without distortion. In the larger story of her life and work, the praise of leading scientists functions less as a milestone and more as a reflection. It reflects back to her the qualities she already embodies: originality, integrity, and a deep engagement with fundamental questions. It also reflects the hopes of a scientific community that understands how rare such qualities are and how essential they are for the future of physics. Ultimately, the significance of this recognition lies not in how it elevates her status, but in how it confirms the value of a particular way of thinking. It affirms that even in a fast-moving, competitive academic world, there is still room for minds that move slowly, question deeply, and prioritize understanding over acclaim. In recognizing Sabrina Pasterski, leading scientists are also recognizing the enduring importance of originality itself. The comparison of Sabrina Pasterski to Albert Einstein does not arise from superficial similarities or media fascination with genius narratives. It emerges from something deeper and more difficult to define: a shared independence of mind and an unconventional relationship with scientific authority. In both cases, the resemblance lies not in specific discoveries or historical impact, but in the way each thinker approaches reality itself. The comparison is less about achievement and more about attitude, about how knowledge is questioned, reconstructed, and pursued in isolation from prevailing expectations. Einstein's greatest breakthroughs did not come from elite laboratories or large research teams, but from solitary reflection. He worked outside the mainstream academic system for years, relying on thought experiments rather than institutional validation. His independence allowed him to question assumptions that others accepted without hesitation, such as the nature of time, space, and simultaneity. Sabrina Pasterski's approach to physics echoes this tradition. She has consistently shown a preference for thinking deeply and independently, rather than aligning herself with dominant research trends or institutional incentives. What defines her unconventionality is not rebellion for its own sake, but a quiet refusal to allow consensus to replace understanding. In modern physics, many problems are approached incrementally, with researchers building small extensions on established frameworks. This process is productive, but it can also create blind spots. Pasterski tends to focus on those blind spots, asking why certain assumptions are made and whether they are truly necessary. This habit places her at the edges of accepted thought, where progress is slow and uncertainty is high. Like Einstein, she places great importance on conceptual clarity. Einstein famously valued physical intuition over formalism, often criticizing theories that were mathematically elegant but conceptually opaque. Pasterski similarly seeks clarity beneath complexity. She does not reject mathematics, but she treats it as a language that must serve understanding rather than obscure it. When equations become detached from physical meaning, she is willing to step back and re-examine the underlying ideas, even if this means abandoning well-trodden paths. Another strong parallel lies in her relationship with authority. Einstein respected earlier thinkers but did not treat them as unquestionable. He was willing to challenge Newtonian mechanics, despite its centuries-long success, because he recognized its conceptual limits. Pasterski exhibits a comparable balance of respect and skepticism. She engages deeply with established theories, understanding them from the inside, but she does not hesitate to question their foundations when inconsistencies arise. This willingness to challenge deeply rooted ideas is rare, especially in young scientists, and it is one of the reasons senior physicists find her work so compelling. Her unconventional approach is also reflected in how she navigates academic structures. Einstein struggled within traditional academic systems early in his career, finding them restrictive and misaligned with his way of thinking. Pasterski, though operating in a very different historical context, has shown a similar resistance to institutional pressure. She has declined prestigious opportunities that would have increased her visibility but constrained her freedom. This choice mirrors Einstein's prioritization of intellectual independence over professional advancement, suggesting a shared belief that deep thinking requires space and autonomy. Solitude plays a crucial role in this comparison. Both thinkers value extended periods of isolation as essential to creative thought. Einstein often spoke about the importance of working alone, free from distraction. Pasterski similarly chooses to spend long stretches thinking independently, allowing ideas to develop slowly and organically. In a modern academic culture that emphasizes constant collaboration and communication, this preference can appear unconventional, even risky. Yet it is precisely this solitude that allows for the kind of deep restructuring of ideas that leads to fundamental insight. The comparison also extends to their patience with unresolved questions. Einstein spent decades grappling with unified field theories, often without success. He was willing to devote his life to problems that offered no guarantee of resolution. Pasterski exhibits a similar patience. She is drawn to foundational questions that may not yield answers quickly or at all. This long-term perspective distinguishes her from researchers who focus on problems with clearer paths to publication or recognition. Another point of similarity lies in their indifference to fame. Einstein became a public figure almost against his will, often expressing discomfort with celebrity. Pasterski, despite media attention and praise, avoids the spotlight. She does not cultivate a public persona or seek to fulfill the narrative others project onto her. This detachment reinforces the sense that her motivation comes from curiosity rather than validation, a trait strongly associated with Einstein's character. It is important to note that such comparisons are not claims of equal impact. Einstein revolutionized physics in ways that transformed human understanding of the universe. Pasterski's career is still unfolding, and it would be unreasonable to predict outcomes on that scale. However, the value of the comparison lies in recognizing patterns of thought rather than outcomes. It highlights the importance of independence, originality, and courage in scientific inquiry, qualities that transcend specific achievements. Critics of such comparisons often argue that they romanticize isolation and undervalue collaboration. While collaboration is undeniably important, the history of physics shows that certain conceptual revolutions require solitary rethinking. Pasterski's approach does not reject collaboration outright, but it places independent reasoning at the center. She engages with others when it serves understanding, not when it serves visibility or momentum. This selective engagement mirrors Einstein's own approach, where dialogue complemented but never replaced solitary thought. The comparison also sheds light on broader concerns within modern science. Many physicists worry that increasing specialization and institutional pressure are narrowing the space for unconventional thinking. In this context, Pasterski represents a reminder that alternative paths are still possible. Her resemblance to Einstein is less about destiny and more about resistance to systems that prioritize speed over depth and conformity over originality. Her unconventionality also manifests in how she defines progress. Rather than measuring success through accumulation of results, she measures it through refinement of understanding. This internal metric aligns closely with Einstein's philosophy, where the elegance and coherence of ideas mattered more than their immediate acceptance. Both thinkers share a belief that the universe possesses an underlying simplicity, even if reaching it requires radical rethinking. Another subtle but important parallel is their relationship with uncertainty. Einstein famously embraced thought experiments that challenged common sense, using uncertainty as a tool rather than an obstacle. Pasterski similarly treats uncertainty as a productive space. She is not intimidated by incomplete knowledge or unresolved contradictions. Instead, she sees them as signs that deeper principles are waiting to be uncovered. This comfort with uncertainty is essential for anyone working at the frontiers of physics. The comparison also influences how others interact with her work. When senior physicists sense an Einstein-like independence, they tend to engage more carefully, recognizing that unconventional ideas may require time to be understood. This creates a different kind of intellectual environment, one that values dialogue over immediate judgment. In this way, the comparison shapes not only perception but interaction, subtly protecting space for originality. It is also worth noting that Einstein's legacy has sometimes been misunderstood, reduced to a myth of effortless genius. In reality, his work involved years of struggle, isolation, and doubt. Pasterski's path similarly involves quiet persistence rather than dramatic breakthroughs. Recognizing this parallel helps demystify genius, showing it as a process rather than a gift. Ultimately, the comparison between Sabrina Pasterski and Einstein is meaningful not because it predicts future revolutions, but because it highlights enduring values in science. It reminds us that progress often depends on individuals willing to think differently, to question what others accept, and to work patiently without guarantees. Pasterski embodies these values in a contemporary context, adapting them to a world very different from Einstein's but no less challenging. Her unconventional approach serves as a counterbalance to trends that prioritize productivity and visibility. It suggests that even today, there is room for minds that move against the current, guided by internal coherence rather than external reward. In this sense, being called the next Einstein, is less a title and more a description of method, a recognition of independence as a force in science. As her work continues to evolve, the comparison may fade or transform, but its significance will remain. It captures a moment in which the scientific community recognizes something rare, a thinker whose allegiance is not to fashion, institution, or expectation, but to understanding itself. That allegiance, more than any specific discovery, is what truly links Sabrina Pasterski to the spirit of Einstein and gives weight to the comparison. Sabrina Pasterski's reputation for challenging established ideas does not come from dramatic rejection of existing theories or provocative public statements. Instead, it grows from a quieter and more demanding habit of thought, a refusal to accept assumptions simply because they are widely used, historically successful, or institutionally reinforced. Her approach represents a deeper form of challenge, one that operates beneath the surface of formal agreement, where the true structure of ideas is tested rather than merely applied. In modern physics, many foundational theories are treated with a mixture of respect and resignation. They work extraordinarily well within certain domains, yet everyone knows they are incomplete. Quantum mechanics and general relativity, for example, both describe reality with remarkable accuracy, but they are fundamentally incompatible at their deepest levels. Over time, physicists have learned to work around this tension by developing technical tools and approximations that allow progress without resolving the underlying conflict. Pasterski is drawn precisely to this unresolved space. She is not satisfied with workarounds. She wants to understand why the conflict exists and what it reveals about the limits of current thinking. Challenging established ideas in this way requires a particular kind of courage. It is far easier to accept the framework of a field and contribute incremental results than to question the framework itself. Incremental work is safer, more predictable, and more easily rewarded. Pasterski's choice to focus on foundational inconsistencies places her outside the most comfortable paths of academic success. Yet she persists, not because she seeks opposition, but because unresolved contradictions signal to her that understanding is incomplete. One of the ways she challenges established ideas is by revisiting concepts that many physicists treat as settled. Ideas like spacetime, symmetry, conservation, and information are often used as tools rather than objects of inquiry. Pasterski turns these tools into questions. What is spacetime really made of? Why do certain symmetries exist? And what happens when they are pushed to their limits? How is information physically stored? And what does it mean for it to be conserved in extreme conditions? By asking such questions, she reopens debates that others consider closed, not to discard past work, but to deepen it. Her challenge to convention is also methodological. In many areas of theoretical physics, complexity has become normalized. Long calculations, dense formalism, and specialized language can sometimes obscure rather than illuminate physical meaning. Pasterski resists this tendency. She seeks conceptual simplicity, even when the mathematics is unavoidable. This insistence can feel disruptive in environments where technical mastery is equated with depth. Yet her approach reminds others that mathematics is a means, not an end, and that clarity is a legitimate and necessary goal. Another way she challenges established ideas is through her treatment of uncertainty. In mainstream research culture, uncertainty is often something to be minimized or hidden. Results are presented with confidence, even when their foundations are tentative. Pasterski is unusually comfortable acknowledging what is not known. She treats uncertainty as an integral part of inquiry rather than a weakness. This stance challenges the performative certainty that sometimes dominates academic discourse and encourages a more honest engagement with unresolved problems. Her independence also leads her to question the social structures of science. While she does not reject collaboration or peer review, she does not allow consensus to replace reasoning. In fields where large collaborations and shared assumptions dominate, dissent can be subtly discouraged. Pasterski's work challenges this dynamic by demonstrating that intellectual progress does not always follow majority opinion. Her example suggests that disagreement, when grounded in careful thought, is not a threat to science but one of its essential engines. She also challenges the idea that progress must be fast. Contemporary science is often driven by funding cycles, publication pressure, and competition. These forces shape what questions are asked and how they are pursued. Pasterski's slow, reflective style stands in contrast to this tempo. She is willing to spend years refining ideas without producing conventional outputs. This challenges the assumption that productivity and insight are directly correlated. Her work implies that some insights require time scales that modern systems struggle to accommodate. Another established idea she implicitly questions is the separation between physics and philosophy. While many physicists view philosophical inquiry as secondary or even distracting, Pasterski's work engages with questions that are inherently philosophical in nature, such as the meaning of space, time, and information. She does not approach these questions loosely or speculatively, but with rigorous attention to physical consistency. In doing so, she challenges the boundary that often separates conceptual inquiry from technical research, suggesting that the deepest problems demand both. Her challenge to established ideas is also visible in how she engages with historical theories. Rather than treating past frameworks as either sacred or obsolete, she treats them as evolving structures. She looks for what remains unresolved within them and asks whether their successes might point toward deeper principles. This attitude challenges the linear narrative of scientific progress, where old ideas are simply replaced by new ones. Instead, she views progress as a process of reinterpretation and refinement, where past insights continue to shape future understanding. Importantly, her challenges are not confrontational. She does not seek to dismantle existing theories for the sake of novelty. Her questioning is careful and respectful, grounded in deep familiarity with the material she critiques. This makes her challenges more difficult to dismiss. They do not come from ignorance or rebellion, but from sustained engagement. Senior physicists recognize this difference, which is why her questions are often taken seriously, even when they unsettle comfortable assumptions. The way she challenges ideas also reflects a broader ethical stance toward knowledge. She appears motivated by a sense of responsibility to truth, rather than allegiance to any particular framework or community. This responsibility demands honesty about limitations, patience with complexity, and willingness to revise one's own views. By embodying these values, she challenges a culture that sometimes prioritizes certainty, speed, and authority over understanding. Her approach also influences how others think, even when they do not adopt her conclusions. By questioning assumptions, she encourages colleagues to re-examine their own foundations. This ripple effect is one of the most powerful forms of intellectual challenge. It does not require agreement to be effective. It simply requires others to think more carefully about why they believe what they believe. Challenging established ideas also carries personal costs. It can lead to isolation misunderstanding, and slower career advancement. Pasterski appears aware of these risks and accepts them as part of the path she has chosen. This acceptance further distinguishes her from those who challenge norms primarily to gain attention. Her challenges are inwardly motivated, sustained by curiosity rather than reaction. In a broader sense, her work challenges how success in science is defined. If success is measured solely by publications, citations, and visibility, her approach may seem inefficient. If success is measured by depth of understanding and long-term impact, her approach appears essential. By embodying the latter definition, she challenges institutions to reconsider their priorities, even if only implicitly. Her resistance to established ideas also extends to narratives about genius. Rather than embracing the role of a revolutionary figure, she remains focused on the work itself. This humility challenges the tendency to personalize science, to frame progress as the product of individual brilliance rather than collective inquiry guided by careful thought. In doing so, she recenters attention on ideas rather than identities. Ultimately, Sabrina Pasterski's challenge to established ideas is not an act of opposition, but of renewal. By questioning assumptions, clarifying concepts, and refusing to accept partial explanations as final, she keeps fundamental physics alive as a living discipline rather than a closed system. Her work reminds us that even the most successful theories are provisional, tools rather than truths. This stance is especially important at a time when physics faces deep conceptual crises. Many researchers sense that current frameworks are incomplete, yet few are willing to confront the implications directly. Pasterski's willingness to do so does not guarantee solutions, but it preserves the possibility of genuine progress. It ensures that unanswered questions remain visible rather than buried beneath technical success. In the end, challenging established ideas is less about rejecting the past than about honoring its unfinished business. Pasterski approaches physics as a conversation across generations, one in which unresolved questions are invitations rather than embarrassments. By accepting those invitations, she plays a role that is both disruptive and essential, pushing the field to remember that understanding, not comfort, is the true goal of science. Sabrina Pasterski gives insistence on valuing understanding over titles, awards, or popularity, places her at odds with many of the dominant incentives of modern academic life. In an era where success is often quantified through credentials, rankings, fellowships, and public visibility, her choices appear almost countercultural. Yet this attitude is not a rejection of excellence or rigor. It is a deliberate commitment to a deeper standard, one that measures progress by clarity of thought rather than external validation. From early in her academic journey, it became clear that Pasterski did not view titles as destinations. Degrees, affiliations, and honors were not goals in themselves, but tools that could either support or obstruct genuine inquiry. When such markers aligned with her pursuit of understanding, she accepted them. When they threatened to shape her thinking or constrain her freedom, she was willing to walk away. This willingness is rare, particularly among young scientists navigating highly competitive environments where recognition often determines opportunity. Modern academia is structured around scarcity and comparison. Fellowships are limited, positions are competitive, and prestige is unevenly distributed. These conditions create powerful psychological pressure to optimize one's career path, sometimes at the expense of intellectual honesty. Pasterski's stance challenges this structure at a fundamental level. By refusing to treat titles as measures of worth, she undermines the assumption that recognition and understanding naturally coincide. Her approach suggests a different hierarchy of values. At the top is coherence, the sense that ideas fit together in a way that feels internally consistent and physically meaningful. Beneath that is curiosity, the drive to ask questions even when they lead away from safe or fashionable topics. Only after these come credentials, which she appears to regard as secondary and contingent. This hierarchy shapes not only what she works on, but how she works. One of the clearest expressions of this attitude is her reported willingness to decline prestigious opportunities. Such decisions are often misunderstood as indifference or eccentricity. In reality, they reflect a careful assessment of cost. Prestige can bring resources and influence, but it can also bring expectations, obligations, and subtle pressures to conform. For someone focused on foundational questions, these pressures can be especially distorting. Pasterski seems acutely aware of this trade off and chooses intellectual freedom even when it requires personal sacrifice. This choice also reveals confidence of an unusual kind. Confidence is often associated with ambition and visibility, but her confidence appears rooted in trust in the process of understanding itself. She does not need constant affirmation to sustain her work. She trusts that clarity, once achieved, has intrinsic value, regardless of how quickly or widely it is recognized. This trust allows her to work patiently on problems that offer no immediate reward. Her attitude toward popularity further illustrates this point. In contemporary science, public engagement and media presence are increasingly encouraged, sometimes even expected. While communication is important, it can also incentivize simplification and spectacle. Pasterski does not position herself as a public intellectual or cultivate a narrative around her persona. She allows attention to come or go without adjusting her focus. This detachment suggests that she does not equate being seen with being understood. By prioritizing understanding, she also reframes what it means to contribute to science. Contribution is often measured by outputs, papers, citations, talks. Pasterski appears more interested in outcomes that are harder to measure, such as refining a question, clarifying a concept, or identifying an overlooked inconsistency. These contributions may not immediately register in metrics, but they can have profound long-term impact by reshaping how others think. Her stance also influences how she engages with learning itself. When titles and grades are central, learning can become instrumental, focused on performance rather than comprehension. Pasterski's learning appears intrinsically motivated. She studies not to demonstrate competence, but to resolve confusion. This orientation encourages depth rather than breadth, understanding rather than coverage. It allows her to linger on difficult ideas until they make sense, rather than moving on to satisfy external timelines. This approach can be uncomfortable in structured environments. Courses, programs, and evaluations operate on schedules that may not align with deep understanding. Pasterski's willingness to resist these pressures suggests a strong internal compass. She does not reject structure outright, but she refuses to let it dictate the pace or direction of her thinking. This autonomy is essential for engaging with foundational problems that do not yield to standardized methods. Valuing understanding over titles also shapes her ethical relationship with knowledge. Titles can create authority, and authority can discourage questioning. By refusing to anchor her identity in status, Pasterski remains open to being wrong. She does not need to defend a reputation built on credentials. This openness makes it easier to revise ideas, admit uncertainty, and explore alternatives. In fundamental physics, where errors and dead ends are inevitable, this flexibility is crucial. Her attitude also challenges others, sometimes implicitly. In environments where prestige is highly valued, someone who appears indifferent to it can disrupt social dynamics. Such indifference raises uncomfortable questions about motivation and purpose. If one does not seek titles, what does one seek? Pasterski's example suggests an answer that is both simple and demanding. She seeks understanding. This answer forces others to reflect on their own priorities, even if they do not share them. There is also a historical dimension to this stance. Many of the figures now celebrated as great scientists worked in contexts where titles mattered less or came later. Their primary allegiance was to ideas rather than institutions. Pasterski's approach echoes this tradition, not as nostalgia, but as adaptation. In a system that increasingly rewards visibility, she reasserts the primacy of insight. Her resistance to prestige does not imply isolation or arrogance. She engages with peers and mentors seriously, valuing dialogue and critique. What she resists is the conversion of these relationships into hierarchies of status. She appears to treat ideas as equalizers, believing that their merit does not depend on the rank of the person who proposes them. This belief aligns with the deepest ideals of science, even if practice often falls short. By valuing understanding above all, she also accepts uncertainty about outcomes. Titles and awards offer reassurance, signals that one is on the right path. Understanding offers no such guarantees. One can devote years to a question and still fail to resolve it. Pasterski's willingness to accept this risk speaks to a profound commitment. She appears willing to let her work be meaningful, even if it is not immediately successful or recognized. This commitment has implications beyond her own career. It serves as a reminder that science is not merely a professional activity, but an intellectual one. When titles become ends in themselves, inquiry can lose its vitality. By contrast, when understanding is the goal, even modest progress feels significant. Pasterski's example keeps this distinction alive. Her stance also invites a re-evaluation of mentorship and evaluation in science. If understanding is central, then mentoring should focus less on navigating prestige and more on cultivating depth. Evaluation should consider quality of thought, not just quantity of output. While she does not set policy, her presence embodies these values in a way that can influence those around her. Over time, this attitude may shape her legacy more than any single result. Titles fade, institutions change, and recognition shifts. Understanding, once achieved, becomes part of the collective knowledge of humanity. By aligning herself with this longer horizon, Pasterski places her work within a continuum that extends beyond personal achievement. It is also important to recognize the discipline required to maintain this stance. Indifference to prestige is easy to claim but difficult to practice, especially when opportunities are presented and expectations imposed. Pasterski's consistency suggests that her values are deeply internalized rather than performative. She does not reject titles loudly or theatrically. She simply does not chase them. This quiet consistency reinforces the credibility of her approach. It signals that her choices are not reactions against the system, but affirmations of a different standard. She is not defined by what she refuses, but by what she pursues. That pursuit is understanding, pursued patiently, rigorously, and without guarantee of reward. In the broader context of her life and work, This value system helps explain many of her decisions. It explains her tolerance for solitude, her focus on foundational questions, her resistance to fashionable topics, and her measured engagement with public attention. All of these follow naturally from a commitment to understanding as the highest good. Ultimately, valuing understanding over titles is not a rejection of success, but a redefinition of it. Success becomes the moment when an idea clicks into place, when a contradiction dissolves, when a deeper pattern reveals itself. These moments are private and often invisible, yet they are the true engines of progress. Sabrina Pasterski's life and work remind us that science advances not because of the titles we accumulate, but because of the understanding we are willing to pursue, patiently and honestly, even when no one is watching. Sabrina Pasterski is often described as representing a new generation of physicists, but this description can be misleading if it suggests a simple continuation of existing trends. In many ways, she stands apart from the dominant patterns shaping contemporary science. Rather than embodying speed, scale, and specialization, she reflects a return to depth, patience, and conceptual seriousness. Her presence highlights a quiet shift in how some physicists are beginning to rethink what progress means and how it should be pursued in a rapidly changing scientific landscape. The generation she is associated with has grown up in a world saturated with information. Access to knowledge is unprecedented, yet understanding has not necessarily become easier. The sheer volume of research, publications, and data can obscure fundamental questions rather than illuminate them. Pasterski's approach responds to this condition by slowing down. Instead of racing to keep up with the flow, she steps back to ask which questions truly matter and which assumptions are worth re-examining. This stance challenges the idea that more information automatically leads to deeper insight. One of the defining features of this new generation is its awareness of the limitations of existing frameworks. Young physicists today inherit theories that are extraordinarily successful, yet visibly incomplete. Quantum mechanics and general relativity both work remarkably well, but their incompatibility remains unresolved. Pasterski's work reflects a generational willingness to confront this tension directly rather than working around it indefinitely. She does not assume that the current toolkit is sufficient. Instead, she treats incompleteness as an invitation to rethink fundamentals. Her example also illustrates a shift in how authority is perceived. In earlier eras, authority in science often flowed from seniority and institutional affiliation. While expertise remains important, Pasterski's generation is more likely to value coherence and reasoning over reputation alone. Her willingness to question established ideas, even those endorsed by influential figures, reflects a broader cultural change toward intellectual autonomy. This does not mean rejecting expertise, but it does mean refusing to let authority substitute for understanding. Technology plays an ambiguous role in this generational shift. On one hand, computational tools, simulations, and collaborative platforms have transformed how physics is done. On the other hand, they can create a sense of progress that is more technical than conceptual. Pasterski's work resists the temptation to equate sophistication of tools with depth of insight. She engages with mathematics and theory not to showcase complexity, but to clarify meaning. In doing so, she models a way of using technology without becoming dominated by it. Another aspect of her generational significance lies in her attitude toward career structure. Traditional academic paths often reward early specialization and rapid productivity. Pasterski's choices suggest a different priority. She appears less concerned with defining herself narrowly and more interested in exploring connections across fields. This breadth is not superficial. It is grounded in a desire to see how different areas of physics inform one another at a foundational level. Her example challenges the assumption that specialization is always the optimal path to excellence. Her presence also reflects changing attitudes toward visibility and success. In a world where scientists are increasingly encouraged to build personal brands, Pasterski's low-profile approach stands out. She does not cultivate an online persona or seek constant public engagement. This choice resonates with others who feel that the pressure to perform publicly can distract from deep thinking. Her example suggests that it is still possible to contribute meaningfully without constant self-promotion. The generational shift she represents is also ethical in nature. Many young scientists are questioning not only how science is done, but why. They are aware of the social, environmental, and philosophical implications of their work. Pasterski's focus on fundamental questions reflects an ethical commitment to understanding reality at its deepest level before attempting to control or exploit it. This commitment aligns with a broader sense of responsibility that values knowledge for its own sake as well as for its consequences. Her approach also highlights a renewed respect for uncertainty. In an age that often demands clear answers and rapid solutions, uncertainty can be uncomfortable. Pasterski treats uncertainty as an essential part of inquiry rather than a problem to be eliminated. This attitude resonates with a generation that recognizes the limits of certainty in complex systems. It encourages humility and openness, qualities that are increasingly important as scientific questions grow more intricate. The way she engages with mentorship and community also reflects generational change. Rather than seeking hierarchical relationships defined by status, she appears to value dialogue grounded in shared inquiry. This preference aligns with broader cultural shifts toward collaboration based on mutual respect rather than authority. While she works independently, she does not isolate herself intellectually. She engages selectively, valuing quality of interaction over quantity. Her generational role is further evident in how she navigates interdisciplinary boundaries. Contemporary problems often span multiple fields, yet institutional structures can discourage cross-disciplinary thinking. Pasterski's work moves fluidly across physics, mathematics, and information theory, treating boundaries as provisional rather than fixed. This flexibility reflects a generation more comfortable with hybrid identities and less constrained by traditional labels. The symbolic power of her story also matters. Narratives shape who feels welcome in science and what kinds of careers seem possible. Pasterski's example challenges narrow stereotypes of success. She shows that one can pursue fundamental questions without conforming to every expectation of the system. This message resonates with young scientists who may feel alienated by hypercompetitive cultures or rigid career models. Her representation of a new generation is not about age alone. It is about orientation. It is about choosing depth over speed, coherence over visibility, and understanding over accumulation. These choices reflect broader cultural currents questioning efficiency as the ultimate value. In this sense, Pasterski is not an outlier, but a focal point, making visible a set of values that many share but few articulate. It is also important to recognize the tension inherent in this generational stance. Institutions and funding systems still operate largely according to older models. Young physicists who prioritize depth and patience may struggle to find support. Pasterski's path highlights both the possibility and the cost of resisting these pressures. Her example does not offer easy solutions, but it demonstrates that alternative paths are viable, even if they require sacrifice. Her influence as a generational figure does not depend on mass adoption of her approach. Even a small number of individuals committed to foundational thinking can shape the direction of a field over time. By keeping fundamental questions alive, they ensure that physics does not become purely technical or self-referential. Pasterski's work contributes to this preservation of purpose. The idea that she represents a new generation also invites reflection on continuity. While her values feel fresh, they echo earlier traditions in physics. Great advances have often come from individuals willing to step outside prevailing norms and think deeply about basics. In this sense, the new generation she represents is also an old one, reconnecting with a lineage of thinkers who valued understanding above all. Her presence encourages institutions, mentors, and peers to reconsider how they evaluate promise. Instead of asking who produces the most papers or attracts the most attention, her example suggests asking who thinks most deeply and honestly. This shift in evaluation, if adopted more widely, could reshape how talent is recognized and nurtured. In the end, Sabrina Pasterski's significance as a representative of a new generation lies not in her age or biography, but in the values she embodies. She reminds us that science is not just a race toward results, but a long conversation with nature, one that requires patience, humility, and courage. By choosing to engage in that conversation at the deepest level, she offers a vision of physics that is both demanding and hopeful. Her story suggests that even in a fast-paced, metric-driven world, there is room for a different rhythm, one that honors thought over noise and insight over immediacy. This rhythm may never dominate, but it does not need to. Its influence lies in its ability to keep science grounded in its original purpose, the pursuit of understanding. Sabrina Pasterski's career offers a striking example of how early passion, disciplined focus, and intellectual independence can converge to produce exceptional scientific development. Her trajectory is remarkable not because it follows a conventional pattern of achievement, but because it embodies an extraordinary alignment of curiosity, creativity, and rigor. From the beginning, she displayed a level of self-directed learning and experimentation that went far beyond what is typical for students of her age, revealing an intrinsic motivation that would define her later work. She built her understanding of physics not solely through classroom instruction, but through hands-on experimentation, designing and constructing complex devices that allowed her to explore fundamental principles in a concrete way. This approach not only honed her technical skills, but also fostered a deep sense of physical intuition, a quality that often proves critical in theoretical exploration. Her early experiments were not isolated exercises in engineering. They were guided by conceptual curiosity. She sought to understand how theoretical principles manifested in tangible systems. This dual engagement linking abstract theory with practical experimentation developed a kind of thinking that is rare even among advanced students: the ability to anticipate outcomes, to foresee potential complications, and to interpret results in light of both theoretical frameworks and empirical observation. This synthesis of mind and hand would later inform her theoretical work, allowing her to approach problems with a clarity and grounded perspective that sets her apart. As her skills and understanding grew, she pursued increasingly sophisticated projects. Her capacity for independent thought was evident not only in the technical complexity of her work, but also in her willingness to challenge standard approaches. She demonstrated an early tendency to ask questions that others might overlook, probing foundational assumptions in a way that suggested a natural inclination toward conceptual rigor. This pattern, where experimentation is inseparable from inquiry, laid the groundwork for her later focus on the most fundamental problems in physics, particularly those at the intersection of quantum mechanics and general relativity. Her educational path, while impressive in traditional metrics, was secondary to her intellectual pursuits. She attended prestigious programs and interacted with leading scientists, but these institutions served as resources rather than frameworks for shaping her thinking. She navigated them with discernment, selectively engaging with mentors and opportunities that complemented her goals, rather than allowing herself to be fully guided by institutional expectations. This selective engagement reflects a broader principle evident throughout her career: a prioritization of understanding over prestige or convention. It is an approach that requires confidence, patience, and the willingness to endure periods of isolation or misunderstanding, particularly when tackling problems that others consider marginal or overly ambitious. During her undergraduate and graduate studies, this principle manifested in increasingly ambitious research. She gravitated toward questions that probe the deepest structures of reality: the nature of spacetime, the behavior of gravitational systems, and the subtle interplay between quantum phenomena and relativistic frameworks. These problems are notoriously resistant to straightforward analysis, and they often demand prolonged, solitary contemplation. Her early mastery of both experimental techniques and theoretical tools allowed her to approach these questions with a balance of precision and creativity, making her well-suited to engage with problems that confound even seasoned researchers. A defining feature of her work is the integration of conceptual and technical rigor. She does not allow the mathematics to become a substitute for understanding. She insists that each equation, each model, correspond to a physically meaningful insight. This insistence reflects a broader intellectual ethos: that knowledge is valuable not simply as an accumulation of results, but as coherent insight into the structures underlying reality. Her capacity to maintain this focus, even under pressures to produce conventional outputs, demonstrates a level of discipline and maturity that is exceptional for any researcher, and especially for one at an early stage of career development. Her early recognition through invitations to collaborate, awards, and attention from senior scientists reflects not just her technical ability, but the unusual clarity and independence of her thinking. Experienced physicists often distinguish between competence and originality. Competence can be demonstrated in many ways. Originality is rarer, requiring a combination of imagination, intuition, and the courage to follow ideas that do not yet have established paths. Pasterski exhibits this originality consistently, and her early accomplishments serve as evidence of a mind capable of sustained, high-level independent reasoning. Her career trajectory also exemplifies a broader principle regarding the cultivation of potential. The combination of early exposure, self-directed learning, and the freedom to explore foundational questions produced a cumulative effect. Her abilities did not develop linearly, but exponentially, as each layer of understanding provided a platform for the next. This pattern illustrates the importance of nurturing intellectual autonomy, particularly in fields where creative insight is as critical as technical skill. Pasterski's experience demonstrates that fostering deep curiosity and independence at an early stage can yield long-term capabilities that outpace conventional measures of achievement. A related aspect of her development is resilience. Engaging with problems at the frontiers of knowledge is inherently challenging. Success is rare, uncertainty is constant, and progress is often invisible. Pasterski's ability to remain focused despite these conditions is remarkable. Her early experiments required persistence, patience, and iterative refinement. These habits carried forward into her theoretical work, where the stakes are conceptual rather than mechanical, but the demands for rigor are equally intense. Her resilience underscores the role of sustained engagement and perseverance in producing exceptional intellectual development. Her story also highlights the interplay between curiosity, driven exploration, and strategic engagement. While she pursued her interests with independence, she was also aware of the value of collaboration, mentorship, and institutional resources. She used these selectively, integrating them in ways that enhanced rather than constrained her intellectual freedom. This balance between independence and strategic interaction exemplifies a model of scientific development in which autonomy and community support are not opposed, but complementary. It demonstrates that exceptional achievement often depends on the ability to navigate institutional structures thoughtfully, without allowing them to dictate one's intellectual priorities. Finally, her early career illustrates the long-term impact of cultivating foundational skills and habits. Technical mastery, conceptual clarity, independent judgment, and persistence are not merely immediate tools for solving problems. They are capacities that compound over time. By developing these capacities early, Pasterski positioned herself to engage with the deepest questions in physics with both confidence and flexibility. Her trajectory suggests that the most significant scientific contributions often arise from the cumulative effects of disciplined, curiosity-driven development, rather than from singular moments of inspiration or rapid advancement. In sum, Sabrina Pasterski's early intellectual formation demonstrates how independence, focus, and a commitment to understanding can converge to produce exceptional scientific potential. Her development exemplifies the value of integrating experimentation, conceptual clarity, and disciplined inquiry from a young age, and it underscores the importance of autonomy and resilience in navigating complex, high-stakes intellectual challenges. Her story illustrates that the cultivation of deep, self-directed habits of thought can create a foundation upon which extraordinary contributions to science become possible.